Hello, Chris. Hi. Namaste. and
Namaste.
welcome. So nice to have you on here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Babu. That's great to be here. Love talking marketing, love talking AI. So this was a no-brainer.
All right. So, for those of you who don't know, Chris Cochran is the VP and head of marketing at AK Identity and one of the co founders of Hacker Valley Media. It's such an honor, Chris. I'm so glad we could get some time to talk. And I have a bunch of things to ask you. So, I'm going to dive right in if that's
Let's
okay
do it.
with you. All right. So, right off the top, what do you believe are the most significant benefits and risks associated with just integrating AI into marketing strategy?
Yeah, I would say some of the benefits obviously is ideation, right? Coming up with new ideas. You could go straight to Chat GPT and say, give me some ideas about X, Y, and Z, whatever your industry is, whatever your product is. It can help with
Mhm.
idea generation. It could also help with distillation. So if you have a lot of information and you want to be able to convey that information in a very quick and concise way, it can help you distill that messaging down. But then it can also
Yeah.
help you expand. So if you have just a few like really critical points you want to get across, but you feel like it needs some additional legs to communicate that to somebody, it can help you expand as well. On the risk side, I mean, there's quite a few of them. Number one, obviously, we all know that AI hallucinates, and so you might get wrong information. And if you don't, cross your T's and check your I's, you're going to potentially put wrong information out into the world, and that does reputation damage, right, for a brand. Also, you want to make sure that you're not plagiarizing, right? Because we all know that a lot of these models have trained on data all around the world, a lot of public source, but a lot of it could be copywritten, right? And so you don't want to just take something that you get out of ChatGPT or some of the other software that you use to generate content and just use it willy nilly. You have to do your due diligence to ensure that you're not plagiarizing. And then I would
Mhm.
say the other thing is it's almost like this curse of just good enough, right? Because I think
Right.
what AI is really good at, especially generative AI, is really good at giving you something to work from. Like it's a almost like this amorphous sort of blob that you can kind of fold and mold to your own liking. But I would say
Mhm.
that a lot of people are just taking those outputs and then putting them straight out into the world. And you're
Mhm.
missing a really big opportunity to put your own spin on it, put your own brand, actually give some insights that might be useful for folks. So I would say those are probably some of the risks there.
I love that you mentioned that. That's so true. The part where it becomes very vanilla after a
Hmm.
point, right?
Right.
It's so I mean, I get it. The job is done, the task has been accomplished. It's just not good. Or
Right.
it's not great. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It may be good,
Hmm.
it's not great. And then it's
Exactly.
definitely not personalized. It's definitely not got your voice. So there's so much to be done in terms of understanding what parts of AI can be used well, and then
Hmm.
what parts just be, um, becoming table stakes almost.
Right.
So yeah, that's such a good point that you made. My next question was about with AI's capabilities to hyper personalize these marketing efforts that you mentioned.
Mhm.
How can companies kind of balance personalized marketing and also consumers' privacy concerns?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I come from the headspace because I was a practitioner in cybersecurity for a long time. And sort of my philosophies around privacy is number one, transparency, right? Letting people know exactly how you're leveraging their data, but then
Mhm.
also having the integrity to know what data you need to do your
Mhm.
job and not
Mhm.
taking any more than that. Because I think
Yeah.
where people get into trouble is where they just like, just give me all the information and then we'll just use it how we see fit. And that's when you get
Right.
into all kinds of regulatory issues and things like that. You have different legislation that comes out and it's like, oh, well, you can't do this anymore because of X, Y, and Z. So if you're always taking the approach of, all right, we can do this hyper, personalized marketing, but let's do it in a way that isn't creepy, that isn't over the top, right?
Yeah.
And I think as long as we come from marketing from that lens, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Sarah Hartland brought up something like this. So when it comes to ABM and ABX, they've been using AI a lot to like kind of get the messaging down pat. And then one of the things she said was like, if you had to dig that information out of the third page of Google, maybe you shouldn't use it.
Right.
It's one
Yeah.
of those things. Like there was this one, and I want to say an SE or someone who reached out to a potential client with, "Oh, we know that you love to donate to this one ballet thing." Like it
Mhm.
was very, um, like, how do you know that kind of,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't wanna go too far. I mean, I think there is something charming around someone taking the time to get to know someone, like, "Oh, yeah, I just saw on social media that you posted about your kid, and they had done X, Y, and Z, and, my kids do the same thing." But when you're
yeah.
getting to the point where someone's like, "Wait, how do you know that?" And they're, like, afraid, then, yeah, it's probably a little too far.
Yeah. I think again, that would be something that a human would know in their gut.
Mhm.
But when it comes to AI again, it's like those lines get kind of messy. Okay, and then my next question to you was, from your perspective, what are the key indicators that a company is successfully deriving the right ROI from any sort of AI investments it's making, specifically in marketing? Because I mean, I
Yeah,
know that a lot of people are buying tooling and they are buying, they're putting a lot of backbone into this.
yeah.
And without really being able to measure ROI, especially since it is fairly new. So, do you have anything that would help some of us on that?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's an extension of the marketing KPIs, right? If you see those key performance indicators going up, the ones that are more tied to content, the ones that are tied to consistency, the ones that are tied to just eyes on page, honestly, then you know that maybe we're doing something right, right? Because we measure our programs and people, processes, and technology. And so if you're
Mm,
bringing in a new technology, if you don't have the right people, if you don't have the right processes, it's going to be for nothing, right? You can
absolutely.
buy all the AI solutions in the world, and then if they just sit there, they're not useful. Or if you're using them incorrectly, it won't be useful as well. But if you're bringing in AI to do something specifically, then you're going to say, okay, so then what is this operation tied to at the marketing level, at the business level? What are the objectives we're trying to hit with
Mhm,
including this AI? Because I mean, it's really like a superpower leveraging AI. And I
mhm,
think a lot of people, especially in cybersecurity, when I first heard that AI was really coming out to the forefront, even before like generative, but then when generative came out, I thought everybody was going to be singing its praises because I immediately saw a lot of time savings, I saw a lot of cost savings, but a lot of people turn their nose up at it, actually. I think it's
mhm,
just got too popular too fast. But I think
mhm,
the folks that don't adopt artificial intelligence, the folks that don't adopt generative AI, they're
mhm.
going to be fighting a losing battle in some sense
Right.
because the folks that can really leverage it to expand and do more and be more impactful and be more intentional, those are the folks that are going to win at the end of the day.
I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. And who, how can AI be used to improve customer journey? And with the various touch points that we have, and now we do understand that there's a lot of noise, and the signal
Mhm.
to noise ratio is all much harder to achieve today than it was even just a couple of years ago. How
Mhm.
can we enhance customer experience at various levels and various touch points?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things ever. I probably started doing this maybe a year and a half ago. But what I would do is anything that I'm trying to do, whether I'm writing a book, whether I'm creating a video, a movie, creating a product,
Mhm.
creating messaging, I always have a persona in mind, right?
Okay.
And before using generative AI, I would say like, okay, this is my person. I'd create a bio for them, and I'd really try to empathize with who they are and where they're coming from and the challenges that they have. Now, with
Mhm.
something like generative AI, you can literally create the perfect avatar for who you're trying to speak to. And then you can ask them the questions
Yep.
that you would want to ask somebody and they'll answer honestly. Sure, there
Mhm.
might be some weirdness with their answers. There might be some, it might be very vanilla, but it'll at least start to push you in the right direction and even give you some insights than if you were just trying to be inside your head and come up with this messaging. But when you're really thinking about who am I trying to speak to, who am I empathizing with, who am I trying to evoke those emotions from, and then you can craft them into a person, whether it's in your mind or in a prompt, then I think you can start to really resonate with that audience.
That's fantastic. You mean like, and correct me if I'm wrong about how this process would work, but do you mean being able to give customer persona information and then kind of pretending like you're having a conversation with that persona and then being able
Yep,
to derive the right questions and answers? Okay, that's
exactly.
really cool.
So
Yeah.
for instance, like if I was like, I want to speak to people that are in security, but they also lead identity management, for instance. So
Mhm.
I could say, you're a middle manager that's leading identity for the security team, and you could give them a list of attributes. You could give them a list of inclinations. You could give
Mhm.
them background, education. You could give them whether they have kids or a family. You could give them all these details because one of the things I
Beautiful.
do is I write screenplays, and I love writing complete characters. Even some of the most, unremarkable characters in a story could still have this tremendous background, which gives them a realism to them. And so I would say
Mhm.
do the same thing when you're talking about how do you start to craft messaging and content for someone to digest. You really have to think about them because a lot of times we get wrapped up in our own stuff. We get wrapped up in our own ideas, but when we turn that lens to other people and we start to say, okay, what do they need to hear, or what do they care about, or what are their challenges, then you start cooking with grease when it comes to all this messaging stuff.
That's very interesting, Chris. It's a very interesting data set to be feeding an AI and then kind of getting the information you might need from that.
Mhm.
Plus, I can just think of the advantages of being able to come back to that kind of a conversation and
Mhm.
then feeding it more data sets and bringing it down. That's a cool approach. I'm gonna use that one.
Yeah, use it, take it.
And then, okay, my next question was, are there any new or emerging AI technologies that you find particularly exciting? Something that's, on your list, like, oh, I want to try that kind of thing for something that's marketing specific.
Yeah, I would say the main things because I do all multimedia, podcasts, audio, and video. I think the like Sora,
Oh,
Sora, has.
yeah.
Have you seen videos of those? I
Oh my
mean,
goodness.
they're incredible. So I'm thinking that I'm sure there's just still going to be some massaging that you'd have to do in order to make it useful for someone. But I
Mhm.
think it's going to get to the point where you can probably craft an entire commercial, and I'm sure it might not be the most
Yes.
perfect commercial in the world, but if you are a startup with a very small marketing budget, video that is decent would be better than being completely silent. So I think a lot of the stuff in video, one of the technologies that they're really pushing is this digital avatar, which I think is pretty cool. I think there's a lot of concerns
Uh,
around like deep fakes and people using it for the wrong reason. But one of the
mhm.
things you could do is, let's say you have a chief evangelist, and that chief evangelist is, let's say it's a completely AI chief evangelist, right? And you're very
Right.
transparent with the people that you're speaking to, you could have an
Mhm.
evangelist that's popping out content at scale with your scripts that
Yep.
you're potentially, crafting originally in ChatGPT or something else or copy AI or something. And then you're saying, okay, now let's massage this and make it great. And then boom, that's the transcript for your AI chief evangelist to put messaging out there into the world. So, I mean, there's a lot that's going on around that area that I'm super interested in.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, I can't wait to get my hands on Sora. Me and my team have been like dying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, we
How
have
did
done
you get
something.
into AI, if you don't mind me asking?
Sorry?
How did you get into AI, like, in the marketing space?
Oh, for us, it was basically okay. So where it started for us, we were one of the early adopters. So
Mm,
I'm the CMO of a company called AppSec Engineer.
yeah.
It's an AI, it's a application security training platform. And then one of the things we did at scale was to rebuild a lot of our labs and entire training modules in various different languages. So one of the first things we did when AI hit the book stand, so to speak, was to create an entire copy of our database and
Mhm.
put it out there in Spanish and Portuguese. So that was one of
Mm.
our earliest reasons to like use AI. And from there, we also integrated another thing called AppSec GPT, which is
Mhm.
basically like, we had students who were having a lot of difficulty figuring out a roadmap that suits them on
Right.
what they should be learning first and then learning later and then figuring out what works for them specific to their use case. And our training is across the board, like there's too much, right? So
Mhm.
then what we did was we created this AppSec GPT, which were built into the platform, which would be able to train on all of the modules that we're putting up, all of the new training stuff that we're putting up, and then absorb from that user's requirements at work what their future requirements will be, all of that stuff. I mean, this is
Mm.
this is just a conversation they're having, and then be
Right.
able to give them a roadmap that would work for them. That's something that's achievable for them, depending on what their other constraints are. So this was one of the earliest ways in which we went into AI. After
Mhm.
that, we started integrating it into customer interactions. We basically trained it on data sets that was across the industry. And then
Mhm.
we hit the ground running with AI, with us hitting the $1 million mark in under a year.
Right.
So we were one of the, I think, first companies that did that was to adopt AI every single avenue that we could, and we
Right.
were very, very on very lean budgets. We
Yeah.
went and we're bootstrapped and we're gonna stay that way, but yeah, that's kind of been our thing. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I love early adopters. You know, a lot of early adopters get hate for jumping on to the newest trends in technology, but honestly, sometimes those are the people that win, right? Look at people that got into Bitcoin when it was a fraction of a penny. So
Absolutely, yeah.
kudos.
We've been one of those people who've loved it. We've been very transparent about it. We're also one of the first training companies to start AI security as
Hmm.
for training in AI security. So yeah, I
Right.
mean that's just been our thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And okay, the other question I had for you was, where do you see the future of AI? In marketing, uh, I'm talking like 55 to 10 years down the line. I know this is crystal ball stuff at this point, but what should marketing leaders be doing to prepare for these future trends?
Yeah, I would say I'll start with what marketing leaders should do right now. I think marketing leaders should maybe not spend too much time trying to figure out all of the things, right? There's just so much going on. There are going to be companies that pop up, functionality that pops up, things that go away very quickly. But what I would do is always keep your ear to the ground for what's coming, right? Think about what are some of the things that your team might be able to use from an AI perspective to make things easier for them. There's
Hmm.
still a lot of wasted time. There's still a lot of wasted effort that people go through from a day to day perspective. So, what are the mundane and the repetitive things that we can completely outsource to automation and outsource to AI? Thinking about it from that lens, I think is going to be really important. And honestly, so I had this idea. This is probably around GPT-3 or so. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, this is incredible. And at the time, I'm doing a lot of content creation based on like podcasts and things like that. And I was like, wouldn't it be amazing to take like an MP3 or a video file and be able to put it somewhere and it would transcribe your entire conversation and then start to populate things like show notes and populate things like social posts. And I had this
Hmm.
idea and I called it content tree. And so I had a conversation with everybody at Hacker Valley, and I was like, I think this is going to be an avenue that happens. And
Hmm.
they decided like, it would be a complete pivot for the company. So like, let's just put a pin in that. And so I was always on the lookout for a company that was doing this. And honestly, Swell.ai, so Cody and Max, they probably had the company for a couple months before I found them on social media and I reached out and I said, hey, I had this exact same idea. Let me give you some of my thoughts around like where this could go. And honestly,
Hmm.
some of the ideas that I had, they've been able to productize and turn it into revenue for them. But where they're headed is they want to be able to be a marketing team in a box, or at least a content marketing team in a box, where you could feed all this information into its own repository and then develop different content, different copy, website copy, posts, blogs, and all that stuff at scale based on your own information. So I think that's where we're headed. We're going to be able to do a lot more with less through AI. And honestly, with things like video, with things like video correction and audio, I mean, there's just going to be so many things that you can do. I'm really looking forward to the point where you can do an entire animation just through AI, because I think that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think we're kind of there with Hey Gen and a few other things. What I'm interested in with Sora especially is like scene setting and like the whole
Yeah,
directorial stuff.
right.
That'll be very interesting. Um, it's a golden age, right? I mean,
It is.
do you do you have a great story of like something that? And I love to wrap interviews with this one because it's
Yeah.
always the one that like brings out the best. Um, but do you have like a really good story where it's like a surprising kind of implementation of AI, something that you hadn't seen before, and now it's kind of become table stakes. Like, oh, I'm going to do this all the time. That kind of stuff.
Well, I don't have one specifically for that, but I do have a story about because I'm a bit of a nerd in a couple different ways. I love neuroscience, psychology. I love astronomy, but I was thinking about this study of almost attention, because right, we do marketing, we do advertising. So how do you get people's attention? But then not only that, from a developmental level, attention is something very important for babies. And when you get too much of it, like what happens to your psyche? And so I was like, there's got to be a study of like attention and sort of this like social norms sort of situation. And I had asked psychologists and they couldn't give me an answer. And I'd just been looking for this. And one day I was in the shower and I was just thinking, because that's where all your great ideas come to you. I was, I was even thinking, I was like, how would I test, what studies would I do in this like field, right? And I came up with three different studies. I was like, there's no way I just created my own, science. So I went to ChatGPT. I took all the studies that I had in my mind, put it in there, and it said, it sounds like you're talking about social neuroscience. And I was like,
Oh,
huh. So there is a name for it.
okay.
And so then I start to look into it. And honestly, there are like five like staple books in that science. And so like one of
Mhm.
them right here is like the introduction to social neuroscience. So I have
Okay.
like five textbooks. I mean, they cost a few $100s a piece probably, because you know how textbooks are. But
Yep.
just being able to see that I have these ideas. I don't know the name for something, but give me a name. And literally, the first page in this book, Introduction to Social Neuroscience, it really encapsulates my entire philosophy around marketing, sales, and just life in general. There are four different interactions that people have. One is selfish, right? I win, you lose. The other one's altruistic, where I'm giving you something, I'm providing charity to you, so you win, I lose. There's spiteful, where it's like, look, I'm going down, we're going down together. And then that final one is mutual, like what is mutually beneficial for both parties involved. And I think a lot of marketing, a lot of sales comes from that egotistical, that self-centered sort of ideology. But if you're coming from it from the aspect of like, how can I help someone else? And by helping them, it's going to help me in the long run. I think that everybody will be much better based on that. So that whole story kind of like wraps around like what my philosophy is in marketing. And it just so happened to be through something in AI, which I think is pretty cool.
That's so interesting. So, I mean, I'm thinking about the implications of that when it comes to like messaging and writing the right copy and all of that. And even if you were to train an AI, an LLM model on these specific, um, all of these interactions would come under bucket A and then B and
Hmm.
then C. And what we want to go for is D. I can't
Right.
imagine getting a very bad output, actually.
Right.
I feel like that would be pretty interesting to try. Could be an
Yeah.
experiment. Yeah. All right.
Do it.
Okay. That's very, very interesting. Thank you so much. So that was very interesting, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I hope I get to see you at RSA. I don't think I will, but if not, then I'll
Right.
definitely find you at Black Hat.
Absolutely. I'll see you there. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you very, very much. Bye